Greetings to one and all present here. I welcome everyone on the third day of DeW 8.0. Swami Vivekananda, the great Indian monk and philosopher, once said, and I quote, "Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached." His views on life and learning continues to inspire millions around the world. On that note, I welcome you to session 13 of DeW 8.0. I would like to call upon the chair for the session, Professor V.K. Gupta from Mechanical Engineering Department, to please take over. Thank you.
Thanks and good morning to everyone. We are beginning the third day of this DeW Design Workshop 8.0. And today, the first lecture is of Chief Researcher Ilona Hopman. So welcome, Dr. Hopman.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let me just introduce you to the speaker. Dr. Hopman has completed the mechanical engineering with a focus on metals from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, Germany in 2010. Then she completed the PhD in Material Science and Engineering from University of Kentucky, USA in 2014. During the PhD work, she worked on magnesium titanium alloys for biomaterial applications. And she also completed the scholarship on language and practical experience in Japan from German Academy Exchange Service DART in 2014 to 2016. Currently, she is working in Taijin Nakashima Medical Company Limited in the R&D department, and she is working on characterization of 3D printed titanium 64 alloy and development of porous surface structure for implants since 2016. So I welcome Dr. Hopman, and the topic of the today's talk is controlling the friction coefficient of porous structure through 3D printing parameters. So I request Dr. Hopman to just begin the lecture.
Okay, first, thank you very much, Professor Gupta, for the kind introduction. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So first, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at your design workshop this year. And yeah, as a medical device manufacturer, the future of design thinking, 3D printing in healthcare is very dear to our hearts. So I'm really excited for this whole workshop. I also got to listen to several speakers in the past 2 days, and I got to learn a lot too. So thank you very much for this opportunity. So I'd like to start right away. Today, I would like to first introduce our company, because I think it's a little interesting, because we have an interesting history, I'd like to say. And after that, I want to talk a little bit about metal 3D printing, and then I'll move on to bone ingrowth and porous implant structures, because that will be important to understand before we move into the main part of my presentation, which is about controlling the friction of 3D printed implant structures. And finally, I'd like to touch upon custom-made implants, which is a topic that several speakers have already touched upon in the previous sessions. So who is Taijin Nakashima Medical? So we are an implant and medical device manufacturer located in Okayama in Japan. And Okayama is located between Osaka and Hiroshima, pretty much in the middle. And our company was established in 1987. What's maybe interesting about our company is that we are a spin-off of a propeller company. So the company where we started as just a design unit in is an internationally operating marine propulsion manufacturer, and they produce some of the world's largest propellers. And as an example, I have the largest model on the on the bottom right for you. And you can see it's quite big in diameter. And yeah, so we are a spin-off from a propeller company. So that's also one way how you can become a medical device manufacturer. Our capital is 100 million yen, which is about 7 crore rupees. We have 260 employees and our annual sales are about 4.7 billion yen, which is roughly equivalent to 300 crore rupees. And in recent years, actually in 2015, we joined forces with Teijin, which is a Japanese but internationally operating chemicals and fiber manufacturer. And so since 2015, we are called Teijin Nakashima Medical. And we have several offices all over Japan to supply products to our customers. So for those who may not be so familiar with biomedical engineering yet, I would like to talk about artificial joints first. So joint replacement is a surgical procedure in which an arthritic or otherwise dysfunctional joint surface is replaced with an orthopedic prosthesis. And this therapy can recuperate the patient's quality of life by relieving the pain and improving the range of motion of the joint. As an example, I've included the two major types of artificial implants, which is the knee joint and the hip joint. And on the left side each, I'm showing you an X-ray of the healthy joint. In the middle, we have an osteoarthritic joint, and on the right side, the joint replacement. In the knee, it's maybe the easiest to understand. On the healthy side, you see the femur and the tibia, and in the middle, there's like a black space. That's where the cartilage is located. The cartilage just doesn't show up on X-rays. And if you have osteoarthritis, your cartilage is damaged. And you can see where the arrow is, there's actually no cartilage left. The bones are touching each other. That's a very painful condition. And when we replace the damaged cartilage with an artificial implant, we get the right side picture. The white spots are metal. That's showing up very bright in X-rays. And there again, we have like a black space in the middle. That's where a polyethylene liner is used. And that also doesn't show up in X-rays. Okay, the manufacturing process for propellers starts with the design phase. Then the propeller is cast. It is then machined and finally polished. And actually for the production of an artificial joint, the process is very, very similar. We start with the design, then it's cast, or in recent years, 3D printed. It will then be machined and finally polished. And this finally polishing step is actually the reason why we as a originally propeller manufacturer are now producing artificial joints, because a friend of our CEO once visited the factory and he said, wow, with this advanced polishing technology, you guys could be making artificial joints. Have you ever thought about it? And that's how the business idea got started. Okay, our products cover several joints in the body. So we have from small joints like finger joints, mid-size joints like elbows. The main implants are hip and knee, but also trauma fixation devices like the intramedullary nail or clavicle plates. And in recent years, we've also started selling implants for spinal fixation. Among all these products, the artificial hip joint and the spine products contain 3D printed parts. We not only produce the artificial joints themselves, but we also make the surgical instruments that the surgeons use to implant our products. And here I'm showing you as an example the set for the knee, which contains about 230 fixed items. So these are shipped every time that a hospital buys an implant from us together with the hospital. And this is a service that we do free of charge. And in addition to those fixed items, we also supply 3D printed patient matched instruments. And on this next slide, I'm going to explain to you what those 3D patient matched instruments are. So the 3D printed patient matched instruments are personalized cutting guides that the surgeons use to prepare the bone for surgery when they want to implant an artificial joint. This improves the accuracy of the surgery. It shortens surgical time, and it also leads to a reduction of the number of instruments that are needed for the operation. The process starts by taking a CT scan of the patient's joint, and that is then used in pre-surgical planning. So from those CT scans, we can construct a 3D image of the patient's joint. And based on this, on the size and the structure, we will decide which implant size is roughly needed, and together with the surgeon decide where the cuts need to be made. And once the cutting plane is defined, we design patient-matched instruments. That means we make these cutting guides both for the femur and the tibia, where I think in the tibial part, it's easier to see there's a slit in the top part of the instrument about here, where the surgeon can just insert the cutting blade and just cuts along that line. That gives a very smooth and nice, accurate cut. That can also be done freehand, but it's very difficult because it's a very slippery surface, and it's harder to get the cut exactly in the position that you want it to be. Okay, and our 3D printer lineup is shown on this slide. We use several types of printers. They can be roughly divided into polymer 3D printers and metal 3D printers. The polymer 3D printers, we are using ABS plastics for prototyping and to make models. And the nylon 3D printer is used to fabricate the cutting guides that I was just talking about earlier. We're also using two types of metal 3D printers. One is an electron beam melting printer, and the other one is a selective laser melting device. And those are used with titanium 64 alloy to make acetabular caps and porous coating for stems and to make spine cages. Our goals in artificial joint development are a longer lifetime, advanced functionality, and optimal performance of the devices. And to achieve those three goals, we are specifically looking at 4 different areas. One of them is the durability of the bearing materials. That means we need to have a high weather resistance and low bioreactivity of the wear particles that are produced. And we are using vitamin E to achieve those 2 goals. So what we do is we add vitamin E to the UHMWPE, which is one of the bearing materials that are used in the joints. On the left side, I'm showing you an example of a good and a bad alignment, like mechanical alignment of the joint. And especially in the case of a bad alignment, you get a lot of wear on the UHMWPE liner, as shown in the middle picture. And with the addition of vitamin E, which has great antioxidant potential and thus improves the wear resistance, we can make an improved implant. And accidentally adding vitamin E to UHMWPE also improves the formability, which is a nice effect for us. To show this effect of the antioxidative properties of vitamin E, I've put together this slide. On the left side, you see a measurement on a block of UHMWPE. One is a conventional UHMWPE on the top that does not contain vitamin E. And in the bottom, I'm showing you the data for our product that is called Blend E. So that is UHMWPE that has a small percentage of vitamin E mixed into it. And we measured the oxidation index in the non-aged and then again in the aged condition. And we see that for conventional UHMWPE, we get a really high oxidation index on both ends of the block. So the sites that are exposed to oxygen. Whereas in Blend E, under the same conditions, there is no significant difference in the oxidation index. And when we repeat the same experiment with like dog bone tensile specimens, in the case of conventional UHMWPE, aging makes the material very brittle. But with the addition of blend of vitamin E, so our blend E, there's no change in the ductility of the material. So we can conclude that the oxidation of UHMWPE is suppressed due to the addition of vitamin E, and thus the ductility is preserved. There's another reason why we add vitamin E to UHMWPE, and that is the wear particles that are produced in the joint as the implant is doing its service for years and years. So in this case, I'm showing you as an example an artificial hip joint. And in that hip joint, the wear particles are produced as the patient is walking with this joint. And the wear particles are eventually released into the body. And when macrophages in the body sense those wear particles, they try to eat those particles. And when they do that, they release cytokine. And the cytokine activates mononuclear cells that then transform into osteoclasts. And osteoclasts are bone resorbing cells. So they basically eat bone. And that leads to implant loosening. If that happens, the implant needs to be replaced because it's not operating properly anymore. This effect can be shown with just cell experiments, but there are also researchers who have done that in animal tests. On the right side, I'm showing you the micro CT scan of a rat skull. In the top image, it's just a sham, so there's nothing has been done to the skull. In the middle, figure B, vitamin E added UHMWPE particles have been embedded between the skull and the skin. And in the bottom, virgin UHMWPE, which is just pure UHMWPE without any other additions, has been implanted in the same location, in the same shape. And those black dots, I think is all you can probably see from that, indicate that bone has been resorbed. And this effect is much stronger in the virgin UHMWPE compared to the vitamin E. So vitamin E has a protective function in the body. So vitamin E suppresses the cytokine release and therefore reduces the bone resorption. Okay, another topic that we're working on is the accuracy and simplification of the surgical technique. The goal is to have less invasive surgery, and to achieve that, we developed a navigation system for surgical procedures and also the bone cutting guides that I showed you earlier. And we're further working on robotic surgery. The last 2 points, bone ingrowth, which means surface modification by chemical treatment and or a suitable architecture of the surface implant by either topology, pore size, etc. And design and mechanical suitability, which means a suitable shape for individual patients, and biomechanical properties similar to bone, are topics that we are tackling with 3D printing, metal additive manufacturing. And our specialty are implants that are specifically geared towards Japanese patients. And the reason why we started making implants is that the Japanese population is on average shorter compared to Westerners. And most implant manufacturers that are doing business in Japan are actually American companies. So their implants are designed for Americans. And many of their products are too large to fit a shorter Japanese person's bones. And the other reason is that our implants are geared towards the traditional Japanese lifestyle, which includes sitting on the floor, as on the picture on the right, with your legs tucked under your body. That requires a very deep flexion that you can see on the X-ray next to this photo. And the American implants were originally not designed to do this because in Western lifestyle, you just sit on a chair. So as long as you can bend your knees for about 100 or 90 degrees, you're fine. But this is not sufficient for the Japanese population. Here I'm showing you a patient who received our fine artificial knee implant. She's in her late 70s and she got bilateral total knee arthroplasty, which means both of her knees are now artificial implants. And this was taken 2 years post-operatively. So you can see she's sitting without problems, and she's also still agile and running around pretty quickly. Next, I'd like to move into metal additive manufacturing. So there are many different metal additive manufacturing technologies, and in this chart, they are grouped by the shape of the raw material. So in the top, we have technologies that work with powder, but you can also do additive manufacturing with wires, sheets, rods, dispersions, filaments, or pellets. And in this presentation from now on, I'll be focusing only on electron beam powder bed fusion. So what are the steps to do metal additive manufacturing? So first you have to create a 3D CAD model, and those data are then sliced by a different software to be fed into the 3D printer. Inside the 3D printer, you will have a powder bed, which is just a layer of metal powder that is melted by an electron beam to produce the part that you have in mind. And once one layer has been partially melted, a rake spreads another layer of metal powder over the original layer, and that is melted again. And this process is repeated until you get your final part. This may be a little bit easier to understand in a video that I've included here for you. Now, this is about making turbine blades by metal 3D printing, but the principle is the same. So first, the 3D printer is filled with the raw material, which is metal powder. And then the rake is depositing the first layer. And that's being melted. And then the next layer is spread out and melted, and so on and so forth. And gradually you build up your whole part. And that is then being taken out. There's still a lot of powder surrounding the part, so we need to depowder it. So it's being glassed to remove the excess powder. So the advantages of 3D printing, there are actually many. I'm just using 4 representatively here. The maybe biggest advantage, at least for us as implant manufacturers, is that it allows the fabrication of structures that cannot be, or at least are extremely difficult or expensive to produce by conventional fabrication methods. As an example, I've included for you a 3D printed peanut that we made. So we took a peanut, we CT scanned it, and then we 3D printed this one-to-one reconstruction. And the interesting part is that we printed it with the peanuts inside the shell, which I believe would be really hard to do by any subtractive manufacturing method. Another advantage is that 3D printing is a free-form fabrication process. That means there are no molds that are used to produce the structure, and therefore the profitability is largely independent from lot sizes. So you can start with lot sizes of 1, because you don't need to print, you don't need to produce hundreds and thousands of parts to offset the high cost of your initial mold. 3D printing also allows for near net shape manufacturing, which reduces the amount of processing steps that you need afterwards. And it can lead to reduced waste, at least compared to subtractive manufacturing, where depending on the shape of your part, you have to cut away a lot of the material that you started out with. However, it's not always just positive. There are also challenges in 3D printing. One of them is the need for well-designed support. So depending on the overall overhang angle, as shown on the left side, if it's less than 45 degrees, you generally need a support structure to support that material. You can also build up residual stress during 3D printing. This is especially severe when you're using laser manufacturing methods. And with that, it can happen that your part deforms while you're even printing it and damages your equipment. And there are now methods to counter that. For example, with software, you can now calculate how much your residual stress is likely going to be. And when you design your part, you can take that into consideration. So the part that you design is slightly deformed compared to the final structure that you'd like to achieve. So when you print it and you get those residual stresses, that will even out or compensate those stresses so that you end up with exactly the shape that you were looking for. Another big issue for us as an implant manufacturer is the removal of residual powder. So the powder particles don't get perfectly melted. There are some powder particles that remain on the surface of the 3D printed structure that are only partially molten. That means they are not strongly attached to the part, and that means they could come loose and just float around the patient's body. So we need to make sure to remove all of these before we sell the implant. Another issue is that internal pores can be formed, and those need an additional processing step, which is usually high isostatic pressing, or HIP for short, to remove those. If we leave those internal pores, we are reducing our strength. That has an especially detrimental effect on the fatigue strength of the material. And next, I'd like to talk about bone ingrowth and porous implant structures. So implant fixation can be broadly divided into two methods. On one hand, we have cemented implants and we have uncemented implants. In the case of a cemented implant, the implant surface is usually smooth, and cement is added between the implant and the bone. The cement, I mean, it sounds like glue, but it doesn't quite work like glue. It's more like a malleable, kind of like a clay that takes on the shape of both the bone surface and the metal implant surface, and just gives you a good fit between those two parts. In the case of uncemented implants, they have a porous coating on the surface. And the porous coating next to the bone is thought to let the bone grow into the porous structure. Because the bone ingrowth is required for this type of fixation, it's usually reserved for younger patients because their bone is more active and more likely to actually grow into those porous surfaces. However, this bone ingrowth process takes a little bit of time, and until bone growth is established, the implant needs to be fixed in place with a different method. And for that, usually screws are used, and those are oftentimes used in combination with friction. That means a surface that has a high coefficient of friction. So here what I'd like you to remember is that until bone ingrowth has occurred, a different fixation method is needed. And here I'm showing you bone ingrowth on a real example in a little bit more detail. On the left side, we have an implant at the time point of surgery, which is flush with the bone surface. And bone here is indicated in gray. And 6 months after surgery, you see that the gray bone has penetrated the porous implant surface. So bone ingrowth has been established. This looks like an implant that is likely to be strongly anchored to the bone. So various conventional surface porous coatings are in use or have been in use. In the top layer, I'm showing you a little bit older versions. So we have a plasma spray. You can also sinter beads to the surface of your implant, or you could cover your implant surface in mesh, which is usually a pure titanium mesh. In the bottom, I'm showing you the implant structures of some of our competitors. For example, Zimmer Biomet has a really successful implant surface called trabecular metal, which is tantalum that's been thermally deposited on a polymer sponge, which is afterwards sintered. So the polymer is burned out and only the metal is left behind. Stryker has, or had, I think this is the previous version of a porous surface structure called tritanium. This is metal powder mixed with a space holder agent. And this is sintered together where the space holder agent makes these holes and is then removed. Honestly, for Wright Medical's biofoam, I didn't find a reliable source on the manufacturing method, but since it looks really similar to Zimmer Biomet's trabecular metal, I'm just guessing that they're using a similar manufacturing method. Now, what all these surface structures have in common is that the porous surface layer is manufactured separately from the acetabular cup, so that these two parts need to be joined together in order to make the final product. And this always carries the risk of the surface layer coming off of the implant, failing while it's in the patient body. So to recap, for implant fixation until bone ingrowth is established, we can divide that into two phases. So first we have the initial fixation before bone ingrowth has happened. And in that case, we need a physical fixation method to anchor the implant to the bone. And when that works well, we can achieve long-term fixation, or biological fixation as it's called, which is bone ingrowth. However, for bone ingrowth to occur, it is paramount that the implant and the bone interface do not move. So if the implant is moving around, bone cannot grow into the implant surface. And if that doesn't happen, instead of bone, soft tissue will grow into the porous implant surfaces, and then bone has no chance of ever growing into that. So that really needs to be avoided for this type of implant fixation to work. And our approach to achieving that goal is to fabricate a porous surface structure with a high coefficient of friction by 3D printing it. Previously, we used mesh, which was also quite successful clinically, but as I told you earlier, it always carries the risk of the mesh debonding from the bulk acetabular cup, so we wanted to minimize this risk. There are several conditions that need to be met for bone ingrowth to occur. The first one is that the pore sizes have to be at least 350 micrometers in diameter. Why 350 micrometers? So bone can only form if there are blood vessels present, because the bone cells need a constant supply of nutrients that are provided by blood vessels. And blood vessels need a space of about 350 micrometers to grow into the porous surface. That's where the 350 micrometers come from. It is recommended that the porosity be 50% or more. And the strong initial fixation is really important. That means strong initial fixation until the bone ingrowth is established. You also want to have a porous structure with a high connectivity, meaning if you compare that, for example, to streets within a city, like on the left side picture, you have like a grid of streets where you can take different routes to go from, let's say, one house to another, compared to the cul-de-sac on the right side, where you just have one street, and once you enter there, you have to take the same route to get back out. That's not very advisable for implant surface structures. And also you want to make sure that the chemical and mechanical properties are as similar to the in vivo conditions as possible. Now, there are several other conditions that have been suggested to improve the bone ingrowth, but I'll just leave it at those. Here I'm showing you a case of an implant where the initial fixation did not work well in figure A, which was taken 3 months after the operation. You see that the implant, the acetabular cup, fits well into the bone. There's no problem. However, 3.5 years after the surgery, it was discovered that there is a radiolucency around the acetabular cup. Radiolucency is this really faint, thin, dark line around the acetabular cup. And that indicates that there is a space. So there's nothing there, which means no bone ingrowth has occurred. And figure C is labeled after revision, which means that the implant likely became loose and had to be replaced. And that is one of the worst cases that can happen. So we absolutely want to avoid that happening. And the appeal of 3D printing for orthopedic implants comes from the ability to print these fine porous structures that facilitate bone ingrowth, which are also very difficult or expensive to achieve with other manufacturing methods. And I told you earlier that it's a free-form fabrication process, so you have no constraints by molds and so on. That means that customization is easy. So you could make a slightly different implant for every single patient, and in terms of tooling, that would not increase your cost. You can also fabricate the substrate and the porous structure in one piece, so you avoid the risk of spalling. Your porous surface structure is unlikely to come off of your acetabular cup. So you have a seamless integration of the porous structure and the bulk substrate. Our approach to produce such a porous structure for an acetabular cup is this product that's called GS cup. The GS comes from the structure which is modeled after a geodesic dome. This implant structure is comprised of 3 layers. On top of the bulk substrate, we have 2 porous layers that are topped by small spikes. And this primary fixation of this implant is done with small spikes on the surface. It gives long-time fixation by bone ingrowth into the 3D pores, and it carries no risk of spalling. This structure is actually used both in the acetabular cup and on the stem part. Okay, and here I'm showing you some pictures of a clinical case. On the left side, we have an X-ray from the day of the operation. And this patient was followed up for almost 2 years until 22 months past surgery. And I'd just like to point out the difference between the day of the surgery and the last time point, which is this pink dotted line, pink circle, and where we see that at the day of surgery, there's a little bit of a gap between the bone and the implant. And within these 22 months, bone has actually grown around the implant and makes a really nice fixation. So that is like, looks like a really promising case for a long time strong fixation and a well-functioning implant. And now I'd like to move into the main part of my presentation, which is controlling the friction of 3D printed implant structures. So for this experiment, we fabricated this GS structure in plates. And to model the extremes that are occurring on the acetabular cup, meaning the dome area and the rim area, we printed these plates in a vertical and a horizontal orientation by electron beam melting. The structure is the same as in the actual implant. On top of the substrate, we have two porous layers, and then we have spikes. And the samples that we actually used in the studies are three different kinds of the geodesic structure. So we have a vertically printed sample with spikes. We have a vertically printed sample without spikes. And we have a horizontally printed sample with spikes. We compared that to pure titanium mesh, which is our previous generation implant surface. And for the sake of comparing that to other researchers' papers, we also included mirror polished titanium. And the actual experimental setup is quite easy. We used 10 PCF sawbone as the sliding substrate. Why did we use sawbone or not real bone? For one, it's really difficult to get a large supply of bone. We did 3 specimens for each of our samples, and that would have required a lot of different bones, and also bone can have different properties if you get it from different donors. And to remove those uncertainties, we opted for this artificial bone. So sawbone is a solid rigid polyurethane foam that has been shown to have similar properties to actual human bone. And the 10 PCF is the density of the sawbone, and that means 10 pounds per cubic feet. And this specification is believed to model osteoporotic bone. So that's what many patients are dealing with that are getting artificial joints. That's why we use that specification. And on top of the sawbone, we put our sample with the porous structure facing the sawbone, and we press that down in a tensile test machine with a normal force from above, and then we pull the sawbone that is sitting on a sliding table while the sample is being held in place by the normal force with a constant pulling speed. And when we record the normal force and the translational force, we can then calculate the coefficient of friction, which is the translational force divided by the normal force. These were the results we got. Of course, mirror polish has the lowest coefficient of friction. And then when we compare the titanium mesh to the several 3D printed structures, we see that compared to the 3D mesh, the coefficient of friction of our 3D printed structures is 200 to 300% of that of titanium mesh. So it's much, much higher. And then we take a closer look at the different variations. We see that by adding spikes, we increase our coefficient of friction to become 150%. Furthermore, by changing the printing direction, we can improve our coefficient of friction by 50%. And the addition of spikes accounts for an increase of 30% in coefficient of friction. And then we added one more experiment where we changed the sliding direction of one type of sample surface, and that changed the coefficient of friction by 9%. And after the experiment, we looked a little bit more into the mechanisms that change the coefficient of friction. For example, with vertical printing and horizontal printing, we looked at the surface topology and the surface roughness to understand what was going on. So vertical printing has a higher coefficient of friction than horizontal printing. And that is because in vertical printing, the surface roughness is much higher than that in the horizontal printing direction. I'm showing you here the topology along the black dotted lines, but the surface roughness was measured on the part between the spikes, which is indicated by this line. It looks like an outdrawn H, because including the spikes would have falsified our results, because the spikes are much higher than the average surface roughness. Then we also wanted to know what's going on with the change in coefficient of friction with the sliding direction. So we looked at the spike placement. So on the right side, when we slide the sample parallel to the printing direction, we see that we have these lines of spikes that are interacting with the sawbone, but there are also corridors in between where there's no spike. So there's like kind of a free space where nothing is happening. On the other hand, if we slide perpendicular to the printing direction, the spikes are covering the whole width of the sample. So there is no unused material, so to say, where no spike is interacting with the sawbone surface, and naturally we're getting a higher coefficient of friction in that case. In conclusion, switching from titanium mesh to a 3D printed porous structure doubles or triples the friction coefficient. And due to the higher surface roughness in vertical printing, the coefficient of friction is 1.5 times higher than that in horizontal printing. Adding spikes increases the friction by 30%, and depending on the sliding direction, the coefficient of friction changes by 9%. So the coefficient of friction can be fine-tuned by varying these parameters. In the next study, we wanted to check whether those results on plates actually also translate into actual acetabular cups and their initial fixation strength. So this time we are using the GS cup and a titanium mesh cup, which is an old product of ours, and compare these two. And we wanted to simulate the implantation process. So we used sawbone again to have a uniform bone-like material that we could easily compare to. And we reamed these half spheres that are usually also produced during surgery. And we used two reaming sizes that are commonly used in the clinical application. One is the same as the cup diameter, and the other one is so-called under reaming, which in this case is 1 millimeter smaller than the cup diameter. And in the experimental procedure, the cups were pressed into those cavities, and then they were levered out, and we measured the moment that's required to dislodge them from the sawbone. These are our results. So we see that in the case of under reaming, there's no significant difference in the fixation strength of mesh or 3D printed structure. However, in the case of same reaming, the 3D printed structure is significantly stronger than the mesh structure. What's furthermore interesting is that there is a significant difference in fixation strength for the mesh depending on the reaming size, meaning with under reaming it's much stronger than in same size reaming, but there's no significant difference in fixation strength for the 3D printed surface depending on the reaming size. Before we did the experiment, or before we impressed the cups, we covered the surface in red ink to check for the seating of the implants. And what we see is that in the case of titanium mesh with under reaming, it's a little bit faint on the dome part, so that is barely in contact, but the 3D printed GS structure, at least the spikes, seem to be in contact with the sawbone in each location. Another thing that we notice is that with the GS cup, we're getting sawbone damage in the rim area. This indicates that the spikes are really like strongly grabbing the sawbone, and we just pull the sawbone out when we do the lever out. This indicates a strong fixation mechanism, but it can also be a disadvantage if the surgeon, for example, during surgery notices that the implant is not in the right position and tries to reset it. And if he takes it out and puts it in, this very area that's holding most of the force has already been damaged and is likely to not give the full strength that it could otherwise provide. So in conclusion, titanium mesh and GS porous structures rely on different fixation mechanisms. The fixation mechanism of titanium mesh is pure friction, which is enhanced by its deformability. On the other hand, GS derives its fixation strength from its rough surface that is mechanically anchored to the sawbone surface. And the initial stability of titanium mesh cups is very sensitive to reaming size, whereas the reaming size is less crucial for the GS cup, meaning it's more reliable. So a high friction 3D printed porous surface gives more reliable initial fixation compared to a smooth mesh surface because it is less sensitive to reaming accuracy. And second, it would be beneficial to develop a cementless cup surface structure that incorporates both fixation mechanisms to further improve the initial stability of cementless acetabular cups. And with that, I'd like to move to the last part of my presentation, which is custom-made implants. So why do we even need personalized implants? Pretty easy. So each patient has their individual bone shape that is determined by their body type, sex, ethnicity, etc. And each patient is likely to have a different progress in whatever disease they are having that causes them problems. And also depending on the attending surgeon, they may use or prefer different treatment options. And on top of that, each individual patient has their own culture and lifestyle that they'd like to continue even after the surgery that would have different requirements. For example, some people may want to continue their favorite sports or have other cultural or religious activities that they want to accommodate. And in this slide, I'm showing some of factors that can lead to the need for customized implants. For example, most implants are designed for adults, but what if children need, for example, an artificial joint? And patients can also suffer from a congenital disease, which is different from patient to patient. Another case is a bone tumor or cancer. And some patients have severe bone defects that are not treatable with standard off-the-shelf products. So in each of these cases, there's either no existing product that fits the situation or no suitable product has been developed to help these patients. And that can lead to abandoned patients, meaning they are not treated, or the treatment is limited to maintaining the status quo, or the patient may require multiple surgeries because there is no alternative treatment available. And all these scenarios lead to a low quality of life, low satisfaction, increased medical expenses for the patient and or the society, and also an increased burden due to the long-term care that the patient requires because he or she is not adequately taken care of. And to alleviate this problem, we want to provide custom-made implants that are suitable to each patient's condition. And with that, we want to provide every patient with the joy of being able to walk on their own 2 feet again. One case where we were happy to provide that is this custom-made artificial tibia for a 27-year-old man who had a bone tumor. This was a goodwill donation. This was not covered by medical insurance. So the man's leg had a bone tumor, as you see on the left side. And because it's cancer, part of the tibia had to be removed to prevent the cancer from spreading, leaving a large gap in the tibia. CT images were taken of his leg, and the missing part that had to be taken out from the bone the replacement for that part was designed in-house, printed with a 3D metal printer, and then implanted into the patient during surgery. And thanks to this implant, the patient was able to resume his daily routine of riding a bicycle, but unfortunately passed away 1.5 years after the surgery because the cancer had already spread to other parts of his body, and he had metastasis in the lung. So usually we don't just do these really, really unique personalized implants, but our general approach is to have one kind of implant that just needs a little bit of tweaking to fit each individual patient. And for that, we need several technologies that need to work together in order to realize the custom-made implant. This all starts with image acquisition. This is usually done with a CT imaging protocol done at the hospital. Next, we receive those data for the design phase. From the patient's CT data, we extract the bone contour and do a 3D bone reconstruction to see the whole situation that's going on there. And based on this bone model, we can then do preoperative planning together with the surgeon in attendance and decide on a suitable implant design. Once the implant design is approved by the doctor, we move to 3D printing technology to actually fabricate this implant. For that, we use titanium 6-4 alloy with extra low interstitials, which is a commonly used material for orthopedic implants. 3D printing allows us to deliver high quality and a quick delivery. And then during surgery, we also provide surgical support to the surgeons and the hospital staff. And after the finished product is implanted into the patient's body, post-operative evaluation is taking place. So to go a little bit more into detail on how the design process of a customized implant actually works, on the left, on the bottom, I've shown you the different design phases. So in case of this acetabular cup, first the cup position and angle is decided on, and then the designer will fill in the space between the nearest fitting cup size to the actual patient's geometry. And after that is completed, they decide on where the flanges go. And after the flanges are established, the screw placement also needs to be decided. Now, this is a crucial step because you have to be very careful to not damage any adjacent soft tissue by screws that are longer than the pelvis. And finally, when we get the okay from the doctors, we move into the production of the actual implant. I'd like to show you the first clinical case for this implant that we had. In the preoperative radiograph of this 59-year-old female, we see that there's a deformity on the right hip joint, which means that the joint center of the femur is higher than the joint center of the left side, which is the normal undiseased part. And because of that, she had leg discrepancy, which led to difficulty walking and severe pain. We built a bone model from the CT data. And with this CT scan model, we were able to just mirror the healthy side onto the diseased size to determine the correct center for the acetabular cup. To compensate for the bone deformities, there was another piece of metal added on there, which also gives more space for screws to anchor this implant into place. And with the screw placement, we achieved strong fixation while also avoiding visceral damage. And after repeated discussions with doctors, a detailed preoperative plan was prepared and the optimal implant shape and position decided. This is the situation during surgery. In the bottom, you see the implant that was actually used and an X-ray from after surgery. And here I'd like to show you the patient walking after she recovered from surgery. And this was a patient who could not walk at all. And now she can walk pretty well, I'd say. So that was a huge success. And in the future, we want to further improve the quality of medical care through personalized medicine. One aspect is the shortening of delivery time and a reduction of the cost. And for that, we hope to use AI to automate the design so that AI can hopefully propose an optimal preoperative plan based on previous cases and experiences. The data also needs to be managed. So there's bone morphology data for each case that can be accumulated, analyzed, and organized in a design library to serve as the basis for future development. And furthermore, we are working on design optimization so that the design reflects the physique, bone morphology, bone quality, activity, and lifestyle of each medical case. And to achieve that, the rigidity must be adjusted to be close to that of that specific patient's bone, and we need optimal topology design. And then we are also developing new 3D porous structures to further enhance the initial stability, initial fixation strength, and make sure that bone ingrowth can happen even earlier. At the same time, we are also actively developing more and more precise surgical support devices. So we've come full circle from custom-made propellers to personalized implants. So the propellers are actually built to order for each individual vessel, depending on its shape and also what kind of waters it's supposed to run in. And now we are fabricating custom-made implants that fit each patient and improve the surgical accuracy, reduce surgery time, and minimize the surgical instruments that are needed. And one nice thing about custom implants is that they can be manufactured anywhere, as long as the modeling data can be input to the 3D printer. For example, a scenario that we could envision is you take the image data, let's say in Japan, and then send them, for example, to India to get an original design. Then the data are sent back to Japan, where the actual implant is printed and then shipped to the hospital to be implanted into the patient. So thank you very much, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Dr. Hopman, for the nice lecture, actually, starting from the how vitamin E can help in reducing the friction and other, improving the bone life, basically. Then the various issues in the additive manufacturing, how the bone growth takes place, then the how we can take care of the coefficient of friction, and finally the customized products. So we have some time. Actually, the next session is at 11:15, so I am taking some liberty, and we can have few questions if some questions are there from the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Ilona Hoffman and Professor V.K. Gupta for chairing the session. We have a number of questions from our audience.
Yes. Yeah,
Question 1. How many people are involved in the process end to end, from the CT scan to the making of the joint and the implanting?
Oh, okay. Of course, I don't have any actual numbers, but I would say, so in terms of hospital staff, you'd have, of course, the surgeon and a couple of attending nurses, for example. I think during operation, we are looking at around 6 to 8 people for a hip surgery. And that's on the hospital side. And then in our company, wow, I don't know how many people are just doing the manufacturing part of this one particular implants, but we have about a little bit over 100 people who work in production. And then we would have about 25 designers. Of course, not all of them are involved in this. But I'd say from start to finish, there are probably ballpark 30 to 50 people involved in making the surgery happen.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think we can move to the next question.
Question 2. These implants are presently used for treating patients. Can these be used in healthy individuals to enhance their physical abilities?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So honestly, with the current state of medicine, or at least these metal implants, I don't think it would enhance the physical property of the human body. This is, I think the natural bone stock and cartilage is still superior, but it's true that there are scientists actively working on making materials that are even better than the naturally occurring biological substances.
Question 3. How can vitamin E be infused into joint implants?
Okay, so this I didn't show this slide. I should have, I guess. Let's see whether I actually, no, I don't have that. So we make this vitamin E. It's actually not infused. I would more call it embedded. It's true there are some manufacturers who first make the bulk UHMWPE and then infuse vitamin E, but we believe that this is not enough. So we produce our our UHMWPE implants in-house, and in order to incorporate the vitamin E, we mix the UHMWPE powder with vitamin E. Actually, vitamin E, it looks like honey and it's sticky like honey. And then the UHMWPE, you could think of it as it's almost like flour. So imagine you make a cake out of flour and honey, and that's what it feels like to mix these two materials.
Question. What advice would you give to a young designer who wants to pursue a career in 3D printed joint implants?
I think there are many different ways you could approach this career, but I think one of the most important things is to get a lot of hands-on experience as early as possible as you somehow can. And maybe there may be some limitations that you cannot get the exposure that you're looking for, but try to get as close to where you think you want to be. And it's also okay to just try different things. For maybe you only have a polymer 3D printer at your disposal, and start with that and see what's possible with that, and read different papers, go to conferences, get as much exposure as you possibly can. That will help you in your future career.
Thank you, Dr. Ilona Hoffman. It was a very insightful session on joint implants, their design and structures. I thank everyone present here for being such a wonderful audience.
Just a minute. I have one question from my side actually.
Please.
These bioplants, we see that every human biochemistry is different.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes they react with the persons also this. So how to take care of that actually? How you do take care of these things while manufacturing the implants?
So that is actually still, I don't want to say debated. It's more like, how do you, I think it's more applicable, for example, in drug design, that you need to imagine how the body chemistry of patient A and patient B may be reacting to the same chemical formula of some kind of medicine. I think the materials that we are using are fairly inert. So titanium alloys, cobalt chromium alloys, and UHMWPE are the materials that we are currently using. And we don't see a huge difference in terms of wear, depending on the patient's body chemistry. What's more important in determining whether our implants are successful or not is a proper mechanical alignment of these implants.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you very much for having me.
The next session will start at 11:15.
Okay.
We look forward to your presence there. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hoffman.
Thank you.
Welcome to the final session of DeW 8.0. I would like to introduce the chair for this session, Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Nanda from Biomedical Engineering and Technology Laboratory, Indian Institute of Information Technology, Design and Manufacturing, Jabalpur. Now I would like to invite him to take over the session.
Thank you very much for giving me chance to chair this session. So in this session, we are introducing our speaker, Mr. Masahiro Yamamoto. So before I invite Mr. Masahiro, I would like to give a brief introduction over his biography. And Mr. Masahiro Yamamoto did his mechanical system engineering from Toyama Prefecture University in 2006. So later on, he's indulging himself in the industrial experiences. So Mr. Masahiro Yamamoto is having 2-year experiences in sales promotion, 7 years of experience in service application support for Europe, and 7 years for sales experience in the overseas sales. So also he worked in the Nakamura Tome Precision Industry Corporation Ltd from 2006 to present. So with this short introduction, so I would like to invite Mr. Masahiro to speak on his title, Machining Technology for the Medical Component by Multitasking Machine. So Mr. Masahiro, if you are ready, so I kindly invite to take this dais. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for giving this opportunity today to talk with you at this time. Okay, let me share the screen first. Can you see this? Can you see the screen?
Yes, the screen is visible.
Visible, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So let me just start by introducing myself and my background. Okay, my name is Masahiro Yamamoto from Nakamura Tome Precision Industry. This is my just introductions. I think that I do not need to explain so much. It's already mentioned. Thank you very much. So I have worked in Nakamura Tome since 2006. And today I would like to talk about the current manufacturing, the parts manufacturing in the medical field. And today I divided my presentation in this three sessions, as you see here. Okay. So, let me explain about first of all, about us, what we are doing about Nakamura Tome. Nakamura Tome is a machine manufacturer who strongly focused on the multitasking machine. And the machine tool is the machine that cut the material into the specific dimension and the shape. And it is called as a mother machine. Okay. The reason why the machine tool is called as a mother machine is because it is necessary starting point in the manufacturing for all industry, like as automotive, aerospace, or also the construction machines. So all the industry is required to have such as parts to make the product. Okay, the machine tool makes the parts together with the customer, which become the components, and finally assemble it into the final product. The start runner in this manufacturing flow is our machine tool. Okay. Therefore, if we provide our customer with good machine and service and solve their problem, that makes all the manufacturing better. Through this activity, we are try to create the future of the manufacturing industry. Okay. So this is our product range is multitasking machines, which is machine tools. And also we are manufacturing the optical machine. Okay. And total employee is about 600, included contract employee and part-time employee. The head office and the main factory is located in Hakusan City in Ishikawa Prefecture. And we are also have the factory, which is located in Daegu City in South Korea. Okay. So we are also the global company with sales record in 55 countries with 70% export. So we are always looking for opportunity to enter the new overseas market. Okay. While being based on the domestic market. A multitasking machine is a machine that realizes the multiple functions, not just a single function. Our race-based multitasking machines have a milling and gear machining capability in addition to turning function. Normally, machines are lined up to complete one part, as you see here on the top. But we are good at machining this process from material to the finished parts in one machine. Okay, so in this slide, our multitasking machine has a two spindle, and the second spindle are on the right-hand side, and the first spindle is left side. So it often called as a counter two spindle machine. Since there are two spindle, after machining is completed on the first spindle, that second spindle pick it up by the transfer. So that makes it possible to cut all the operations in one machine. Okay, and there are also many advantages to combine that process, the machining process. And here is showing that what is the advantage by having that multitasking machines. The first is it does not take so much effort by using the multitasking machine. If multiple machines are lined up, more transportations and also the in-process items which are not completed, and also that more operators who operate the machine is required, and also the more space will be used. If this can be completed in one machine, the number of the machine units can be reduced, so it will be possible to manufacture efficiently. So just let me explain here is just our product lineup roughly. So what we have is mainly like two spindle, one turret, which called the one turret machine. And also the two turret machine, like we have the two turret. So different concept, we have also the three turret machine too. And these are the B-axis machines, which had a swing B-axis and the two spindle. So that are mainly having that capability of the 5-axis machine. So which is mostly that our medical the customer who manufacturing the parts for medical, they are using this kind of the machine. Okay, as I mentioned, our machine are capable to do the turning and the milling operation. So the turning is simply saying that the machine method which cut the material by rotating the parts, as you see on the left-hand side. And the milling process is another machining method, which is cut by rotating the tool. So these mainly these turning and milling function using this two method. So we offer to the we propose to our customer with unique machining proposal. Okay. And in addition, we are actually the company from the machining industry related to the textile machinery. And we are also very particular about the machining. So we keep trying new machining technology that expand the possibilities of the multitasking machine. For example, as you see here, there are the hobbing and the gear skiving to cut the gear, and non-step deep hole drilling, for example, by using the long drill, and also the hard skiving to machine that hardened steel surface. For such as the very special applications, also we daily try to create, try to do it on our product. Okay, so from now, I would like to go explain about for the manufacturing of the parts for the medical parts on our product. Okay. Here you can see in this graph is the country we mostly shipping the machines to the customer who are manufacturing the medical parts. So as you see here, the mostly like US and Europe are our biggest market in the medical segment. And the right side graph is showing about just the type of the machines. There are many kinds of the medical parts manufacturing by our machines. Here I will show the step by step about such as the parts, how it is manufacturing, like a bone plate, bone screw, and spine, hip cap, or liner, or knee joint. Okay. So in most cases, that machine which are used for our medical customer need a wide machining capability. For that reason, this kind of type of the machines, as you see, two spindle on the left and the right, and the upper milling head, which has a capability for 5-axis machining, and plus lower turret. That makes also that also help to support the parts while the machining. Okay. So by having the lower turret, so we have the many variations to cut the parts, also to support the parts. That slide is showing how we can do the cutting on the machines. And these are the example of the machining for the in the medical segment. For example, the hip joint and artificial knee joint, bone plate, medical device, and bone screw, and intermediate rod. Okay, And also I go through here. So here is also the bone screw. So there are a lot of the kind of the bone screw. And also the knee joint. Okay, first is a hip cup. So there are many types of the hip cup produced in our customer. And the first video showed about how it is cut on the product, just as an example. Excuse me, can you hear the sound?
So the video is not audible.
No sound?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. Can I just turn off the screen share? Let me share the sound. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Yeah. And for the also the another case for the hip cup. So this is a very special case, but actually we got from the customer that with hip cup which already has some special coating on the surface of the titanium material. So what we face is to hold, the difficulty is to hold on the chuck to machine the parts. So there are a lot of the requirement for the angle hole drilling on the parts. So what we offer to the customer is a very special, unique chuck design cooperated with the chuck suppliers. That is like clamping with two clamping. By clamping with OD and also the ID. So using the double chuck cylinders to hold the parts inside of the chuck. So this is the pictures of the chuck, actual chuck. How does it look like? And this kind of the solution was required to do that machining for this kind of the hip cup application manufacturing. So that is showing about requirement, the project difficulty. Workpiece clamping, but also the roundness inside with the diameters very tight. And also there's some difficulty to cut the parts because of the titanium and angle hole operations with a different size. And also that they have that 26 different type of the hip cup. So it need to have the different tooling and also the program to cut. But also we could use the tool like using the Shista tool to run the machine efficiently without stopping. So because of the very tough material, so every time after reach to the tool life, so the tool has to be changed, cutting tool. So the next is intramedullary nail. So just here in this figure is showing about what was the difficulty to machine on our product. Actually, we use at the lower turret, as you see here. The difficulty is the surface roughness of the angle hole, as you see here. We did that 3 to 4 steps for the complete the angle hole operations. And finally, to finish, we use that ID boring tools to get the surface finishing. And also, it was necessary to also deburr inside the hole. So there are a lot of the know-how to meet the customer requirement, especially for the accuracy to cut the parts. And this video shows one of the unique points. One of the unique point on with our function is actually that the bottom pin, which are mounted on the lower turret, that pin is supported the parts. Because the parts are very small diameters and long lengths, so that was required to support somehow while the cutting. So to support, what we do is actually we insert a pin into the parts and then just give the tension for supporting. This is also the one of the machining know-how for such kind of the parts machining. Okay. This is another case. So there also need a long drill. That shows about long drill operation. So there was also required for angle hole. On the other side, also required to make the long hole. So this case also all are done by one machine, included the transfer, as you see. So the transfer from the left spindle to the right spindle. This is doing that some milling operations. Okay. So the next example is a knee system. So as you see here now, that is doing also the supporting the parts self with quill. This is a lap cutting, and then it's doing the finishing. So that is how does it completed in one machine. Okay. And okay, next is about the bone screw. So we had that also the many type of the bone screw and also the different size or different material. The first video that is showing the machining for the PEEK. The material type is PEEK material. That is machining from the bar material. There are a lot of features in this part. This is doing now, going to do some threading operation. After supporting the parts itself, and then do that also the kneading operation. And again supporting with the center support and do the rest of the turning operation. And deburring and the finishing. After transfer to the light, surface finishing, and drilling, and that's doing that special hexagon shape on the part. So the project detail is showing here. So there's also another project which was material with titanium. The size is 3.6 by length about 65 millimeters. The cycle time per piece was made by 7 minutes. And there was a lot of the studies to meet the customer requirement in this project. And there are the 4 features for machining these parts. Like a deep hole drilling, and second is hexagon hole machining, and third special threading machining, and the milling. And on the other hand, also there was the point that customer want to work with to cut the parts efficiently. Is that graph showing that how we can save the bar remnant because that the parts was cut from the bar material, and with our product that we could achieve that very efficient cutting to not waste the material. That is also the capability comparisons between our product and a different type of the product. And finally, that what I would like to say here is on our product, we could do that all the operation what customer expect, like a drill, long drill operation, hexagon hole drill or milling are done by one machines. So that was the reason why we could win this project and ship out the machine to customer factory. The next is about the bone plate. So let me start. Material itself is made by stainless steel or titanium. In this video, you will see the cutting demonstration with aluminum. The first step is just lap machining to remove all the material to get the proper shape. The reason why we did this method is to maintain the rigidity for cutting, because that the plate itself is difficult to hold with the chuck. So that's why we did this way to cut the parts. So there are a lot of the process, many operations for turning and the milling operations to remove all the unnecessary parts to get the proper shape and dimension. That is how does it looks like. So there are also included a lot of the hole with the angle. Okay, that is how we did application the machining for bomb plate. And next is about artificial head pump. So for that component, that parts are machined for the with free turret to reduce the cutting time. The material was better, titanium. So through all the process, also we do that all deburring and chamfering to complete the parts. Okay. And there are many cases, the most of case for the customer who produce the cut parts. So they start to do the simulations also through the CAD/CAM. These are the some case how we simulate in the CAD/CAM. For this part is spine parts for implant. That was also, we did the actual cutting on the MX5, MX100, and yeah, actually that real parts also we supply to our customer in Japan. And this is a case for bomb plate. For such as a very special shape required for the parts, so we usually use the CAD/CAM software to create also to create a program for the machine. Okay. I think that is not so complex parts, but like this. And also the lumbar support implant. Okay, so actually that machine having that I was also using the lower turret to support the parts. Let's go to skip. I think next. Next is about hip joint, and that is the typical point is sphericity, the tolerance, the machining tolerance accuracy required less than 5 microns. And material having that also the hard material, HRC hardness, HRC 40. And we machined from the 32mm bar material. So in the video shows about the different material, but the process itself is the same. So you can see how we cut the parts. There was a very special tool, cutting tool was used, so that's why it is not visible in this video, because this is very confidential. So that mainly to get the the surface roughness and also the sphericity, which is less than 5 micron. This is actually the in-process measurement. To measure the actual diameter of the parts. and then transferring. And finishing for the back face. That showed about how it was unloaded. Because actually these components was manufacturing in our factory for the domestic customer. Our company has also the license to manufacture the medical parts in our factory. So at that time we produced that parts in the titanium. And okay, next is about the part tweezer, the medical tweezer. That is a tool which is used for surgery. This is detail of the parts. Okay. As it is written here, it is used to collect the cell from the body for examinations, and also the single-use device because of the infections, and was planned to produce the 12,000 parts per year. The unique point on the machining for these parts was because of the parts length and not diameter, but the diameter, small diameters and the parts length, it needs to support somehow to grip the parts. So we use the vice. We use the vice to hold the parts while the machining. That shows how does it work in the final product. And this video shows about how it is actuated, the vice. The vice is actually actuated with air pressure, pneumatic pressures, that just grip the parts on the machine. And these are the detail for clamping the parts. So that is detail of the vice, which is used for support for the parts machining. Okay. And okay, the next part is liner. Okay. Liner. That is okay. Machined on the Super NTMX. These parts were that fit between the artificial bones of the shoulder joint. Okay. And there are total of 8 types, depending on the size of the human being. Each type required an annual production of the 50,000 pieces. And these parts are manufacturing mainly well, it was in the US, and it is also shipped to Asia and Europe. Okay, so that there are 3 critical points in this project. The first was the better surface finishing, and it was important to have a better chip disposal. And as you see in this slide, it is showing that about work holding, the chucking concept for the main spindle and on the light spindle. And the second point was that the deburring. The part had to be free from the burr. And the third point is unloading process to maintain that no damage or no scratches on the parts. And this slide shows about the detail for the vacuum chuck. Vacuum chuck uses pneumatic air on the right-hand side to hold the parts. And these are the detail of the machining process. So there are a lot of the process to finish, to complete the parts. And this is showing that the detail of the process steps. How does it completed? Like OD rough, OD finishing, OD finish. These are the like a turning process, OD groving. And after milling process. Okay, with specific the diameters and the cut to the specific shape. And the next slide that is showing the right side machines after transfer from left side to the right side. And then these are the list of the machining operations. So through all these machining process, so the part was completed. Next, the parts sample, that is the surgical device. It is machined from the square pre-cut material, and about 80% of the process was milling. Okay, and in this slide you can see that also the work holding concept, chucking concept, and how to hold the parts on the machine. And the requirement, especially the typical tolerance was OD tolerance, which is highlighted in the yellow here, 16 microns tolerance. And also due to the material hardness, very tough material, very hard material, which is about HRC 45. Here, yeah, here it's mentioned. Stainless steel 630, HRC 45. So the difficulty was the tool life. The cutting tool had to be changed by every 5 pieces. So that was biggest one of the concerns. Finally, what we do is to run the machine efficiently, continuously. We use the tool life function by having, as you see in the picture here. So put the same tool on the machines, and then every 5 pieces, so exchange the new tool automatically. So by having the sister tool, like a sister tool, so the machine could run more up to 20 pieces continuously. Okay, next is about also the surgical instrument. That is also the material hardness HRC 40. Okay. And inside of these parts, the motor will be fitted. It is fitted inside of these parts. So the chucking concept is showing here. And there are also a lot of the requirement for loading, for automation, to run the machine, to manufacture the parts efficiently. So it was required to also mount a lot of tools on the machine. And there's also the unique machining process, which is knurling. So the reason why that these kind of the T-slotting, this T-slot cutter is used to do the knurling process was because of the thickness. Because of the thickness of the parts was very thin. So that's why it was necessary to cut this to do the knurling by a slot cutter. And this is showing that the process, all the process to be completed these parts from the square, just a square solid material. So it's roughly about maybe 20 or 30 process need to be done. And this is showing that the process flow, how it can be completed. This is showing on the right side. As you see here, all of the process are mainly the turning or milling. But these kind of the process integration are required to cut the parts. And next is about shoulder replacement parts, which called the stem parts. Material was titanium. The reason why that the customer choose that our product was mainly it was the faster cycle time, the machining time, and also the rigidity for the turret, the lower turret. So that these are also many requirements for the on the machines to maintain that the parts accuracy. I believe the parts accuracy because of a lot of holes and drilling. So they are hard required to put a lot of the devices to measure the cutting tools and also the parts itself. And this is the other parts, which is called the socket. Okay, that is also the requirement for grinding the surface finishing and surface bending. So we could achieve by the vanishing. Okay, and that was also the required the quick cycle time. So we could achieve that about 10% of faster cycle time compared to the other let's say other brand. These are also the project highlights. So what was the requirement to fit on the machine? And this is one of the example of the neck fixed plate. That was for the project in Switzerland. Originally the old solution, the situation where the customer has made about 23,000 parts annually per year. Cycle time was 30 minutes and the material was titanium. So what required is that customer need to manufacture the 44,000 parts per year. They also required to complete the machining in one machines. So the here in this slide shows about the previous manufacturing process. The customer made about the turning and the milling machines to complete the parts. Okay. Finally, what we propose is our turning, our multitasking machines to be completed in one machine. And this is overview. of the system. What we offer, what we shipped to the customer factory. Let's start the video here. So this is showing about how it is manufacturing now with our automations. So the customer requirement was also to have the automations to manufacture the parts, these parts efficiently, because they have to increase the production volume. So as you see here, that by having the two units, so simultaneously can work on the left and right spindle. That is also the one of the advantage of the multitasking machine. So probably it is not visible because of the core oil. So actually, just let me go a little bit quick. So there are a lot of the process to finishing all the all the process. After it's done, that will unload with automations with our compact loader, like a robot hand. Okay. So this is a process characteristic. The raw material is placed on the conveyor belt, and it is clamped in the eccentric chuck on the main spindle. Okay. And after machining, the finished parts unload by the loader. Okay. The cycle time per piece became as you see here. So there are two types of the plate. So with one hole plate or with two hole plate. And finally, that the 43% become faster for the cycle time. So that is the overview of the all the system. To load the material from the in conveyor, like a feeding blank conveyor, and that parts the material, that blank will pick up by the loader, which is fitted in the machine, and the finished parts are unloaded in the another conveyor. And also there the chute, which can be checked periodically to collect the parts for the measurement. Okay. So at end, in summary, what I saw from here, why the machine tool is still necessary for the medical parts manufacturing. Simply, I have the 2 points. The first point is machining accuracy requirement. They are mostly that our customer is saying that they need the very fine surface finishing and the roundness So these to achieve these machining accuracy, it is still necessary to use the machine tools. And the second point is manufacturing the efficiency. That is also because of the machining time and also the production cost to be as a business. So our customer, our customer is also saying that yeah, these points are mostly what they are facing now to manufacturing these medical parts. Okay, and let's go to the third session. Last session is just I would like to share that our machines in India. So this is just a short slide, and so actually we are also exporting the many machines in India. And I have also traveled a lot to India, Pune, Mumbai, Chennai, yeah. But I haven't been yet to Jabalpur, so hope I can visit there. Okay, so this is showing that about our machines, which is in the India. So customer, one of the customer in Mumbai. This is in Pune. And the customer is manufacturing, you know, kind of the connector parts. And this is Maharashtra customer having that some product for the I think that is a measuring instrument to check the temperature. And this is also the customer for Maharashtra, who mainly work for the mold casting. Yeah. And here this is a Chennai, in Chennai. So we are exporting that a lot of the yeah, many machines in India. Hope we can also ship more in the future. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much.
It's there in the answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Himanshu Nanda, for chairing the session. Now we have
Thank you very much.
from the audience. First question: what is roughly the cost of such setups?
Excuse me, can you say again?
Yes, sir. What is the cost? What is the rough cost of such setups?
Rough cost of
the setup that we were discussing about the drills.
The machine.
Machines.
Our machines.
Yes.
Our
Sir.
machine cost roughly. I would say that like as a typical model, which is used for the medical segment, is mostly like the roughly price and the user price. Let's say it's average about let's say 400,000 US dollar. Let's say like 400 or 500,000 US dollar. Okay. You are in the.
How long does it take to manufacture an implant?
In the plant, our machine currently that we have the different type of the model, depend on the machine model, but I think that the shortest delivery one is about 4 months, 4 to 5 months, but the other one is maybe around 8 to 10 months.
Okay, so interesting. Where can designers position themselves in a manufacturing setup for implants?
Excuse me, I couldn't get it.
Yes, sir. I'll repeat the question. Where
yes.
can designers position themselves in manufacturing setup for implants?
Whether, sorry,
So we'll send the question in chat for you.
in the chat, please. Yeah, in the chat, please.
I'll repeat the question again.
Yeah.
Where can designers position themselves in manufacturing setup for implants?
Okay. Where can designer position themselves, manufacturing setup for the implant?
Yes, sir.
Where can designer position themselves in the manufacturing setup for the implant? Is that my understanding? Probably the designer position themselves. I do not understand the question itself. Does that mean the to create how it is made a setup for implant?
In the whole manufacturing process, where can designers come? At what stages?
At earlier stage, while we had negotiations with the customer, always we need to integrate the process, the first stage.
Okay.
So at the stage manufacturing the setup, it need to be studied at stage and where meaning our distributors and also our technicians who are specialized for the machining. They are cooperated together and they integrate the process. Depend on the customer requirement. And basically it is it is integrated in the, as I show you, it is integrated through the CAD/CAM software first.
Okay, sir. So you can stop screen sharing so we can see you clearly.
Yeah. Yes.
Our next question. What are probable human errors as per your experience in such facility?
Human error.
Yes, sir.
Human error is human error is more like in my experience, it's mostly like the human error for the operation.
Operation of the facilities.
Operation of the facilities. So it's more like make a collisions inside of the machine, because the machine itself is very adjusted with high accuracy, but the operator sometimes see that the mistake by operation.
Yes.
Right? Is that correct? My answer?
Yes.
So I could see that the human error is mostly like machine collisions. Yeah, that is the most, I think, the biggest problem that customer is facing. But we did have also in our product like a safety functions in the machine to minimize the damage when the machine collisions happen. Okay.
To you, sir, for reference. Is it possible to design customized implants for specific target users? For example, users who are overweight, having deformities, etc.
This is a difficult question for me, because we are not designing that implant. So we are manufacturer of the machine tools. So I think that probably more the question to the manufacturer, more the part manufacturers for the medical implant. I think, sorry, I can't answer that question yet.
Sure. Last question is your setup. Do you employ experts from other domains like statisticians, designers, etc.?
Can you repeat again? Is it in the chat?
It's been sent to you, sir. I'll repeat. In your setup, Do you employ experts from other domains like statisticians and designers?
No, actually, we don't employ the other specialists. We are our employee. Our employee just integrate has a experience and skill to design such as a process.
Okay, sir.
So
Yeah.
Professor Yamamoto, I think it's a good talk. So I have one question. So
Yes.
what's your recommendations for the large scale manufacturing of this orthopedic or any kind of bio implants, basically the medical implants?
Mhm.
What's your recommendations for the large scale manufacturing of large scale manufacturing in bulk production? So you want to produce a large number of implants at a time.
Yeah.
So what's your recommendation from the industrial standpoints?
From the recommendations.
Yes.
Of course, that to produce a lot of the large number, that is required anyway. The automation.
Okay.
Automation.
Okay.
But this is depend on the shape. How does it looks like the shape of the parts?
Okay.
And the approach for the automation then different, because sometimes we propose with the bar feeders, so that the part itself can be machined from the bar, the solid bar, for example. So such as case, just easily we can offer with the bar material, bar feeder automations with let's say the gripping the unloader system, or we also offer the robot interface, robot automation. So there are a lot different approach. When it's a bit, let's say the case by case, depending on the parts, what kind of parts is, and also the requirement is, and then we do that different approach to the customer.
Okay. So thank you, Professor Yamamoto. So are there any more question? If there is a question, no?
Thank you, Mr. Yamamoto.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the participants for the active participation. And the last session of DeW 8.0 has now come to an end. We'll begin with the valedictory session at 1:15 after a 45-minute break. Please join us there on the same link. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Professor Yamamoto, thank you for
thank you very
joining
much
with us. Yeah,
thank
I
you.
hope to see you in the valedictory section.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
horrible.
All 15 sessions of DEW 8.0 have now come to an end. We invite you to take a tour of our campus.
I take this opportunity to name all our volunteers now.
The graphics team, Sakshi Patel, Dileshwar Rao, Trishna Khalode, Akriti. Video and animation team, Sanjuman Sinku, Saad Ahmad Sheikh, Sai Prakash. Technical team, Paul Anthony, Dinesh Kumar, Chinmay Biswas. Correspondence and social media team, Chaitanya Sadbhai, Supriya Baviskar, Shubham K. Thakur. DeW coordinators, Anugrah B, Aditya Raj Sharma.
very good afternoon to one and all present here. Welcome to the valedictory session. India and Japan share 70 years of diplomatic relations. DeW 8.0 was a testimony of this fruitful collaboration. As a famous Japanese proverb says, when three people meet, wisdom is exchanged. These 3 days of DeW 8.0 exemplify the very same. Now, I would like to invite the coordinator of DeW 8.0, Head of Design Discipline, Dr. Prabir Mukhopadhyay, to deliver his closing remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think DeW 8.0 was a different experience for all of us. This is the first time in the history of DeW that we had this workshop in an online mode. But there were a lot of positive sides to it, that we could reach to a large number of participants. We could have some of those best speakers on the globe with us. I'm thankful to all the speakers. I'm thankful to the participants, organizers. So we divided DeW workshop in 3 different days. Day 1, we started with the application of 3D printing in different aspects of healthcare and medical equipment design, including prosthesis. We saw autonomous healthcare system. We heard experts talk about medical equipment design and the application of design thinking in the same. We have also seen in day 2 how design thinking and 3D printing can be applied in different facets of dentistry, a very important, a very interesting area. We've also seen the aspects of the impact of 3D printing and design thinking on the society, or rather on an aging society. And today, the last day, we had fantastic sessions from our speakers on the different aspects of prosthesis, on the different aspects of implants, and on the different aspects of the manufacturing technology associated with DeW 8.0. We had a fantastic participations, a lot of question and answer sessions, which were addressed by the speakers. And I request all the participants, you can still contact the speakers. You can also contact us if you still have some questions. And I wholeheartedly thank all of you for making this online session such a fruitful workshop for all of us. So in totality, DeW 8.0, the aim with which we started with, you are the best person to judge how far we have been successful in that particular mission. I thank all of you once again from the core of my heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I take this opportunity to invite Dr. Tripti Singh from the design discipline to deliver the vote of thanks.
Kon Ban Wu. Namaskaram. I'm honored to pay my gratitude to the respected guest of honor, Ms. Sato, Professor Ito, and the entire team of Japanese and Indian delegates. Mr. Kuruki, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and esteemed speakers. I take immense pleasure to thank Embassy of Japan, New Delhi, India, for endorsing this event. I'm thankful to our chairperson, BOG, Shri Deepak Gaisas, Director, Professor P.N. Pondekar, Coordinator, Dr. Prabir Mukhopadhyay, Co-Coordinator, Professor Prasad K. Jain, and participants. I take this opportunity to thank session chairs, committee members, officers, staff members who have contributed their best to make this event successful. I would like to thank the entire team, IT team led by Mr. Aditya Sharma for providing all the needed infrastructure, manpower for streaming this event live. A special thanks to our media person for giving wide publicity coverage to this event. I thank design discipline students team who have worked very hard and given this their dedicated support throughout the event. At outset, I would like to express my gratitude to the audience for making this workshop on design thinking and 3D printing in healthcare a grand success. Without your active cooperation, this would have not been possible. I hope and trust that we will meet again physically for the next design workshop in a pandemic-free world soon. Till then, sayonara, namaskaram.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd again like to thank the participants for their active engagement. A special thanks to the guest speakers for sharing their knowledge with us all. I extend our heartfelt gratitude to coordinators, committee members, and student volunteers for their efforts and dedication. Without them, this event would have been a distant reality.
I hope DeW 8.0 was an enriching experience for you all. The recordings of these sessions can be accessed on IIIT DMJ's YouTube channel. Please fill the feedback form shared with you on your registered email IDs, and the certificate of participation will be shared with you shortly after that. We look forward to meeting you all in the next DeW workshop. Until then, stay safe and have a good day.
Please raise for the national anthem. Thank you.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे